In this video, I'm going to demonstrate default parameter values. Now, when you're defining functions in Python, it's extremely common to provide default values for each of the parameters you define so that people can have the flexibility of calling your functions a number of different ways. So for the purpose of this example, let's once again jump into IPython and let's define a new function. We'll call it rectangle area. And for a rectangle's area, we need to be able to calculate the length times the width. So we need two different pieces of information to perform that calculation. So let's define a length parameter, and just for argument's sake, no pun intended, let's give the length a default value of 2, and let's have a width parameter as well, and we'll give that a default value of 3. Now, when you're doing default arguments, you typically want to choose realistic values that somebody would normally want as their defaults. So you might use 1 for the length and 1 for the width, or even 0 for each of those. That would be up to you as the definer of the function. But we want to demonstrate the basic concept here, so we chose some values that we probably would not use normally. And as we typically do, we're going to give this a doc string, so return a rectangle's area. And the return statement for this is straightforward. We simply want to return the length times the width. So a relatively simple function definition in this case. Now, because of the fact that we've provided default arguments, we actually have a couple of different ways that we can call this function. So we can say, let's call rectangle area with no arguments whatsoever. Now, there is no function defined that takes no arguments, but there is a function defined with the same name that has default values for every one of its parameters. So this function call that I'm about to execute is actually going to be treated as if I pass in 2 for the length and 3 for the width. So let's give that a shot, and we see that we get 6 back. Now, if I call rectangle area, and let's say I just pass it a single value, 10, in this case, the Python interpreter is going to take that value and use it as the first parameter in the parameter list. So the length will be 10, and because we're not supplying a second parameter, the width will be 3, so 10 times 3 should give me 30, and indeed it does. Now, of course, we can always call rectangle area with both arguments that we specified, in which case it will simply use those two values to calculate the results. Now, in the next video, we'll take a look at a concept called keyword arguments and talk about other ways in which we could call this same function.